Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com and welcome to this HTML masterclass. So this is meant to be a intro to HTML masterclass. We're going to cover a lot about HTML, only HTML in this video. This is meant for people who are new to web development to really kind of understand HTML out of the box, because I think a lot of people take really kind of understanding what's going on with HTML in the initial steps for granted when they're learning web development, and it can make learning the rest of web development a little bit harder. So while HTML itself is actually pretty straightforward and simple, really understand what's going on really can make a difference in understanding how to use CSS and JavaScript later on. Okay, so I'm using Visual Studio Code. So if you want to have the same environment that I do, you want to go download Visual Studio Code. This will be your text editor where you edit files. And then I'm going to use Google Chrome as the browser, so make sure you have Google Chrome installed. Now some tools. Now when you have Visual Studio Code, over here on the side you have this section here called extensions, where you can download different extensions. Some really useful HTML ones are auto close tag, so that way it just automatically closes tags for you. Auto rename tag, so that way when you need to rename an H1, it renames the closing tag as well. Better comments is nice. It's nothing particular to HTML. Let's see here. Any other good ones for our purposes? Live server is the must. Okay, I'll be using live server throughout this video, so make sure you have that extension as well. Let's see here. I mean, Path IntelliSense is pretty cool plugin to have. That's just for quickly coming up with file names. Prettier is fun, not particularly important to what we're doing today. Rainbow brackets is nice. It helps color brackets so that we can identify what's inside of what. And Peacock's gonna be the last one I'm gonna point out. But I think we must have passed it already. And Peacock is what is making my window so colorful. So if you're wondering why isn't my window colorful, it's because I have a extension called Peacock that just kind of colors, so that way if I have multiple windows open, I can tell which one's what. Okay, so install the extensions you think are appropriate. The only one that you need to have installed to follow along with me is Live Server. Okay, and then again, when you're in VS Code, you can open folder on Linux or Windows. If you're on Mac, you just do open. There'll just be one command to open and just select a folder. But the idea is to select an empty folder to work out of. Okay, cool. And now to work with an HTML file, what you do is you click here to create a new file. And typically what happens is that your first HTML file is always referred to as index.html. And the reason is that servers are designed to look for the index.html file. So in that case, you don't actually have to write index.html, and I'll show you what I mean in just a moment. Okay. And if you hear my bird in the background, I have a cocktail named Wally that's kind of chilling around the apartment. Okay, now in Visual Studio Code, there's another extension that's just kind of built in called Emmet. And what Emmet does, it allows you to write abbreviations that can be turned into HTML. So a nice thing about it is that we can quickly spin up all the boilerplate for HTML by hitting an exclamation point. And so you get this Emmet abbreviation. And this just gives you sort of the basics of what you need to start an HTML program. So anytime you see these angle brackets, that's what's referred to as an HTML tag. Okay, so this first tag here is just a HTML. Well, it's really an element that tells the browser what kind of document it is. It's just saying, hey, this is an HTML document, so that way the browser can interpret it right. The first tag that super matters is the HTML tag. The HTML tag defines where the document begins and ends. So every tag, for the most part, except for a few exceptions, have an opening and the closing tag. And notice that a closing tag always has a slash right before the word. Okay? So remember that. Okay? Opening tag, closing tag. So the HTML document begins here, ends here. So these tags always kind of define where things begin and end. And so that way you can kind of have a very visual representation of what data is inside of what. Now, within the HTML tag, there's generally two main tags inside of it. Head. Now, head is generally where you put all the think of like think anything that's non-visual, that's more like metadata configuration, is going to go in head. Anything that's visual will go in body. So the actual website will be in body. So see here we see these meta tags. Now meta tags are just things that tell the browser information. They're usually used by like search engines, browsers for different configurations. The basic minimum ones you need are here. I don't want to worry too much about that right now. Now, so you notice that these don't have closing tags. So there's a few, again, a handful of tags that just don't get closing tags. If you want, you can make them self-closing tags by just adding a slash at the end like that, and that still would work. And it's not a bad habit to get into, because in the future, if you get into frameworks like React, you have to self-close everything. So not a bad habit to be in. Okay, but these are just meta tags. Like this one is just telling the browser that we're using a UTF-8 character set. So this way you can like use things like emojis. This is just telling it, I guess, some browser information for like browser compatibility. This is saying, okay, hey, the screen, aka the viewport, is the width of the device. Okay, that's all that's saying. It's just for that way. It's really more for like how your CSS relates to the rendering of the website. Again, don't need to change these things. VS Code puts them there for you, and you can kind of just leave them alone. Now, let's open up the website before we make any changes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on the index.html, because if you have live server installed, you can open with live server. And see, there's nothing there, because there's nothing in the body tag. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this window off to the side, and I'm going to move this off to the side so that we can see both at the same time. I will click on here to make the files disappear, so that way we can see this a bit better. So since I'm opening this up with live server, as I make changes, they'll be reflected here. So notice right here in this browser tab, we see document. That's what the title tag changes. So if I change this to my website, notice, see, that changes right there. Wonderful. Okay, neat. Now in the body tag, let's use our first visual HTML tag. Now generally when you have headings, you want to mark them with H1. This actually even not only makes it look like a heading, so if I type in hello world, okay, so not only does it say, hey, the content of H1 is hello world, it also is going to tell the browser. The browser would be like, oh, H1 tags are your headings. So it actually treats those like headings to kind of determine where your stuff should be like ranked in searches and stuff like that. And again, there's H1 through 6. So 2 would be a slightly smaller heading. And the cool thing about, like, this is why the auto replace tag is useful, because if I just start deleting the opening tag, so you notice it adjusts the closing tag as well. I can replace that with a 2. And look, there's hello world. There's H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. Okay, so you have lots of different heading styles. Okay. Now, in order to kind of like see a little bit more what's going on under the hood, Chrome has Devtools. So if you right-click on the screen, and you see right down here it says Inspect, click on that, and it brings up this diagram right here. Okay. All we really care about right now is this element section. So all this is very useful stuff. As you get further down the web design rabbit hole, this is all useful, but here's elements. And here under elements, we can see what things look like so far. So I can see here's my head, there's all my meta tags and my title tag. Here's my body. So I can see inside of body is the H1. Okay, so H1 is a child of body. It's inside of body. Body is H1's parent. It's important to kind of think of it that way, where it's like a tree where one element, is nested inside of another. Okay, and notice if I highlight the H1, I can see the dimensions. And notice that the hello world, even though the hello world only takes up this space right here, it's actually taking up the full width. So you see that blue block represents the actual full H1, which is the full width. And notice it has like this little buffer, this little orange area that's referred to as padding. And margin, actually it's technically margin. Okay, margin's always on the outside, so margin is like the buffer between blocks. So H1 is what's called a block element. Block elements are always take up the full width and they stack on top of each other. So if I were to put another H1, hello world, see they're right on top of each other. And see like that there's that margin between them, that space between them. The blue is the actual element. Okay? But they'll just keep stacking on top of each other. Now, every HTML tag can receive attributes. Attributes go inside the HTML, the opening tag. So right now, the only attribute I'll introduce is style. Okay. Now with style, what you can do is you can actually use CSS, which is a separate language I'll do a separate video on, to manipulate the appearance of the tag. So I can put quotation marks here, and I'll just use a very basic one, color, which is the color of the font, and I'll just say red, colon, and there you go. See, we changed the color of that HTML tag to red. So I could actually sit here and put a style tag or style attribute. And so again, remember, attributes always go inside the opening tag. So between the tags is the content, the text that that element shows. Any sort of configurations of the tag go as an attribute. Okay, they're an attribute. They're different than the text between the opening and closing tag. Okay, and that's going to be important because later on when you start manipulating these things in JavaScript, you need to understand, are you targeting the text of the element or am I targeting the attributes of the element? Okay, but these are block level elements. Another block level element is called a div. Okay, a div doesn't actually have anything in it. So like, see, if I highlight the div, you don't see anything there. But let's see, if I type in some text, it shows up inside the div just like a normal text. But other elements are inline. So if I were to do like an image tag here, okay, image, and see, notice image doesn't get a closing tag because image doesn't need a closing tag. We might as well make it self-closing though and put the backslash at the end. But no picture showed up. How do I make a picture show up? Well, the image tag takes an attribute called source. And source determines where does it pull a picture from. So I got to go find the URL for a picture. So let's go to images.google.com. And let's look up a smile. There we go. I will right click, copy image address, paste it right here inside source. Okay, and then now I should be able to see the picture. So see, there's the picture. It's kind of big. So this is where I can again use the style attribute. So I can be like style equals, and we'll say the height, we'll make it 200 pixels. And there we go. Okay, so make that a little bit smaller. Okay, so you can just inline CSS things. And CSS stands for cascading style sheets. So one way to write CSS styles is right here using the style tag in any HTML attribute, or in the style attribute in any HTML tag. Okay, but you notice, see, like the picture is in the same line as the text. It doesn't get its own block. It's technically all part of the div block. So block elements are blocks that can have stuff inside of it. Inline elements are the content themselves. Okay, and they just tend to stack kind of on a line like text. So for example, I could also use a span. And a span is just a tag that helps designate text. So for example, let's do this. Let me put this on another line. Cheese. Okay, so you see cheese there, but let's say I just want a cheese to be green. Then I can just be like color green. And the spans are really just there to apply sort of like one-off styles. So that way you can, like, if you just want to style like one letter in a word or one word in a sentence. So that's why spans are inline elements. They're there. So I can see it here. Like if I go into here, there's a span. And see, it just covers, the span element is just the cheese there. But again, it's all still in the same line. It's inline content. Okay, another important tag is an A tag or an anchor tag. This is how you send links. So by itself, what it does, it takes whatever's between the A tags and makes it a link. Hello there. Okay, we see hello there, but right now I can't click on it. Why? Because the A tag needs an href attribute in order to be a link. So here I would put like a URL. So we'll say the URL to my portfolio website, https www.alexmercedcoder.com. And see, now it turns blue because it's a link, and I can click on it and it takes me to another website, and there it is. Okay, cool. And another thing to point out, so see how like this, let's take a look at the URL bar. So I'm running a live server, so see it says 127.0.01. That is my computer. So that IP address, sometimes it shows up as localhost, always represents your computer. So localhost 127.0.01, same exact thing, your computer. Now every computer has several different ports on which a server can run. So live server is running a server on port 5500 of our computer. So that's essentially, this whole thing is kind of like a domain name. Like if I went to xyz.com, it's also referred to as the host, like the host of the website. Now here's the thing. Right now it's saying explicitly index.html. But like, remember I mentioned that it'll automatically look for the HTML file, index.html file. So if I just do this, it'll still find the right file. I don't need to write the name of the file if it's index. Okay? That's why the index.html is so particular and so special. Any other file, I'd actually have to type out the name. So if I had like a cheese.html, I'd have to write cheese.html after the host. Okay, so that's why you're going to see files that are always called index. Index.js, index.this, index.that. It's always index. There's always sort of that default file that it looks for. Okay, so now we see the A tag. And again, so a div is just a block, and a block that holds content in it. Okay, H1s are specifically styled for headings. So generally you want to do all your headings in H1s and do your general content in divs. There's also P tags, which are just paragraph tags. They're like a div with some defaults. But doesn't really do anything all that different. It's just another block. So again, you see the div, and then below it's the P, so it's just another block, and they stack on top of each other. The one thing to notice is, see, like a P tag has some built-in margin. Well, a div tag doesn't have any margin by default. See, there's no margin, no padding, no cushion. You would have to style that, add that in through styling. And then there's several other what's called semantic tags. These are basically divs that are built in with special names. One for search engines, so search engines can identify what are the sections of your website better. But also for when you read your code, it makes more sense. So you have like one for the header. So if you want to like designate what's the header of your website, you can put a header tag. And again, it's just another block. Works just like a div. It's just with a different name. Same thing with a nav tag. So that way, this is where you would put like your navigation. Okay, a main tag. This is where you would put like the main content of your body. And they can all go inside of each other too. So you can have tags inside tags inside tags. Okay, and then you have like, let's say inside of your main, you'd probably usually would have like an aside tag if you had like a sidebar. And then it's like, if you had like a blog article, you'd put like article. These are all just divs. They're just divs with special names. The search engines will use these names that can help understand what's going on in your website. That's why it's good to use them. But you see, they're just blocks that stack on top of each other. So if I go down here, you can see they just main, nav, header. They're just divs. And then let me put some content in here. Okay, so if I go here, see main is this whole block because again, main has the aside and article inside of it. If I break down main here, I can see the aside and the article, and they stack right on top of each other. So blocks always stack on top of each other. That's sort of the default behavior. Then there's footer. Okay, you get the idea. Cool. There's some other elements to be aware of. There's like button. So anything between here creates a button. See, there's a button. You have form tags. So inside of a form tag, you can create a form which takes input elements. And each input element takes a type attribute that tells it what kind of input it is. So like, let's say a text input. There's a whole bunch of them. These should be self-closing as well. Input type equals number. input type equals submit. Okay, so you can see, like, here's the text field, here's the number field where I can put in a number, here's a submit button that refreshes the page by default. There's some other input fields that don't have the word input in them, like text area, which is like more for like a lot of text. Text area. So if I go down here, now we see a text area block, and I can like stretch this out and type in a whole lot of text. There's there's a select field, and then inside select we pass in options. Option A, option B, option C. Okay, and you see here, it just makes a little drop down. Okay, so there's a lot of different options here. Really, the forms you won't use until you really start getting into JavaScript, because they're kind of useless without JavaScript, because then the form doesn't send the data anywhere. But you have to kind of fetch the data with JavaScript and then send it to wherever you're going to send it. But the idea is that now you kind of know what these fields are and how they relate to each other. And that's the important thing with HTML. Okay, understanding how these things relate to each other. So again, anything not visual, anything that configures is going to go in the head. Anything that's visual goes in the body. There are two types of elements, block elements and inline elements. So things like h1, div, the semantic tags here, they are all block elements that stack on top of each other. Things like span, image, a tags are inline, so they show up inline. Yeah. And then again, HTML attribute tags can take attributes to configure them. Okay, these are referred to as attributes. Now, last thing I want to show you is how do we connect external files? Because we'll talk about CSS, we'll talk about JavaScript in many of my other videos. So let's say I did create like a style.css for styling CSS. And we'll also create a app.js for JavaScript purposes. To connect these to your HTML file, and again, anything here, any code that's run out of your HTML file, think of it as your front-end code. That's how the browser finds HTML and CSS. It reads your HTML file, and then your HTML file connects to JavaScript or CSS. Okay, so front-end code always has like HTML files as an entry point. But if I want to connect the CSS file, I use what's called a link tag. So we can take advantage of Emmet, type in link, and I can find the link for CSS, and that's a lot easier. And see, I already found style.css, and it takes an href attribute. That's how it knows which file to connect to. And it takes a relationship attribute to know what kind of relationship this is. So it's connecting to a style sheet called style.css. That's in the same folder. Okay. Then for a JavaScript file, I would type in script, and I can look for the one that says source. Okay, and then here in this source attribute, I type in the file, app.js. Okay, and there we go. We've connected our JavaScript file, and we've connected our CSS file. Okay, right now they're not doing anything, but they're connected. So now that kind of is my introduction, my masterclass in HTML. So hopefully this helps you understand HTML a bit better and how to kind of get started with HTML and understanding how it's going. This tool right here, your Chrome Devtool, is your best friend. So using this to kind of like take a look at what's actually going on the website. So like, here's your code, but what happens when it actually runs in the browser? You can go in here, you can change things to test things out. So I can actually like double click on this and like change the text. You can manipulate things here and see. And then also on top of that, this little tool right here allows you to like highlight an element so that we can find that element. So as your files get more complicated, it might be hard to find a particular tag. So you can use this to kind of highlight what you're looking for and be like, oh, okay, there's where that is. And then this right here takes you into like mobile responsive mode, where you can kind of see how it looks like on different phones. So that we can try to create responsive designs that work for different phones. Okay, so really learning how to like get the most out of your Chrome Dev tools really goes a long way in being sort of an effective web developer. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. If you like this video, subscribe, hit the like button, head over to devnursery.com and sign up for the Slack and Discord channel. I'll see you all later. Have a great day and enjoy.